and final session for this year of Good Living Practices with Dr. Ram Rao. And Ram is a well-known Ayurvedic practitioner, scientist, and also yoga specialist, as we know, and we have introduced him in our previous sessions. We are going to be continuing to do this even in January and through the first quarter at least, because of popular demand. And we are going to be bringing more sessions like this, and so that we can continue to benefit from his wisdom and also continue to adopt these good living practices in our daily lives. So without much further ado, let me just start this with our usual prayer. And so, Om Sarve Jana Sukhino Bhavantu, Sarve Santu Niramaya, Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu, Ma Kasyat Dukkha Bhag Bhavet. May everyone enjoy the prosperity, good health, and blessings of the Lord. Let us start this session invoking his blessings, and that he will help us in adopting these good living practices in our lives, and help Ram to guide us in adopting these good living practices in our life. Thank you. And without much further ado, let me introduce Ram. Ram, if you can guide us with whatever is planned for this session, that would be great.
Sure.
And so let us get started. Thank you, Ram, for doing this. We are blessed to have you.
Oh, thank you, Radhika. Thank you for having this platform. And good morning, good afternoon, everybody. So let's get started. So for those of you who were not present in the first two sessions, good living practices is all about keeping the body, the mind, and the emotions in sync. Because the reason is that when we define ourselves as human, okay, and there's a big difference between humans and the non-humans. So when we define ourselves as humans, we need to understand that we are body, mind, and emotions. And these three entities, body, mind, and emotions, have to be kept as a single unit throughout the day, 24/7, which means they have to function as one unit. And only when it functions one unit, that's when you will experience optimal health and wellness. And in the first two sessions, I talked about good living practices tools. I provided some tools to keep the body, mind, and emotions in sync. All right. And I also mentioned that if we live a fractionated life is a life where the body, mind, and emotions act independently. And if it acts independently, you invite ill health and suffering. And so for optimal health and living, you need to practice good living practices, or you need to inculcate good living practices in your day-to-day life 24/7. In the first session, I talked about good eating practices, and I emphasized on conscious eating. And I mentioned about how cooking and eating can be taken as meditation sessions. I mentioned how if you have it as a meditative sessions, your emotions are positive, your mind is calm, and your body is grounded. And in the second session, I talked about maintaining a gentle fast, a fasting period of 12 hours to stimulate a ketosis state. Okay, and this ketosis state has numerous benefits at the level of body, mind, and emotions. And today, in this session, we'll talk about how to boost our immunity, because that has become the word in the pandemic era, how to boost our immunity. And this is another good living practice tool. And what we're talking about is not just physical immunity, because that's the mistake everybody thinks about. They think immunity is only at the level of the body, okay? But it's just not physical immunity. When we talk about immunity, we have to think about immunity at the level of body, mind, and emotions. So with that, let me share my slides, and then we'll talk about that in detail. So I hope you can see the slide here. All right. So as I mentioned, as you can see here in this slide, this is actually I would say, defining what we studied, what we discussed, part 1 and part 2 of our GLP sessions. I talked about cooking. I talked about eating. I said why it has to be a conscious effort. It is a meditation. Okay. And in the second session, I talked about maintaining a gentle fast. And I also talked about having a big lunch at noon. Okay. And then I talked about having a gap between meals. And I said 3-hour gap between dinner and sleep. So I'm assuming that you were able to put this into practice. But this is not the only things. There are other things as well that you need to inculcate into your daily life. So one way, now the first 2 sessions, whatever you do, yes, it does build immunity. Okay. Now we need to boost it up. So one way to boost your physical, mental, and emotional immunity is by having a daily dose of physical exercise. Physical exercise goes a long way in strengthening and protecting not only your brain, but your body, and it helps with regulating your emotions. Physical exercise can be of any kind. It could be aerobics, it could be weight-bearing exercises, it could be endurance exercises, it could be resistance exercises. In general, whatever physical activity you do, it improves stability, it improves balance, it boosts immunity at body, mind, and emotional levels. It stimulates blood flow into the brain. This is extremely important because what happens is as we age, the flow of the blood from the heart to the brain starts decreasing. And unfortunately, we don't have a pill to improve the blood flow. Okay. And that's the reason why as we age, we have age-associated losses in memory and other structural and functional alterations in the brain. And the reason being the decrease in cerebral blood flow. And one way to improve the cerebral blood flow is to engage in physical exercises. That helps to improve cerebral blood flow, as a result of which it improves memory. Physical exercises also induces sleep. So for all those of us who have problems with sleep, exercises are a great way to bring about beneficial sleep patterns. It reduces inflammation, and we are seeing that in this COVID-19 situation. People talk about inflammation. One way to bring down inflammation is engaging in physical exercises. It releases what we call the feel-good hormones in the brain, and it stimulates the HPA axis. The HPA axis is what we call the hypothalamus pituitary axis. What happens? These are responsible for releasing a lot of neurohormones and feel-good chemicals, and these build the emotional immunity. In addition to that, physical exercise actually stimulates the bone cells and restructures the bone fibers, which results in more bone mass and bone stability. And so this becomes very important for both adults and young. Now it's interesting because a lot of people, they come to me saying that, when they come to me for Ayurvedic consultations, they tell me that, yeah, we are engaging in physical exercise because that's one of the things in the intake form. How long do you have exercise? And they say 1 hour. But the problem is they may do that in the morning or they may do it in the evening. But it's just not about having a 1 hour exercise. The question is, what do you do throughout the day? Okay. Because what happens is if you may have a 1 hour exercise in the morning, but then following that, if you engage in prolonged hours of sitting, either working from home or working at home at the office, if you engage in prolonged hours of sitting, it defeats all the benefits that come with that 1 hour exercise. Okay. So it's just not about exercising 1 hour at a given time and then having a sedentary practices throughout the day. Because there are a lot of research studies that show that lack of exercise, sedentary activities, and prolonged sitting, all this can have numerous problems. It can problems with obesity, high blood pressure, osteoporosis. All this can exacerbate. So prolonged sitting also causes problems with digestion of fat. So for people, especially who want to lose fat, okay, you cannot sit for long. It also there's a problem with bone mineral density and the risk of fractures. So scientists always warn that prolonged sitting for 8 hours or longer, it offsets any benefits that come from daily exercise. Okay. If somebody out there, there's a lot of background noise, if you can mute yourself, that'd be great. Thank you. So what it tells us is that even if you fulfill the recommended guidelines for a daily exercise, you are still at a risk for disease or declining health if you practice, sitting practice, if you have long sitting practices. So the question is then, do you have to stand then? Well, standing too much is also not good because it can affect the hips, it can affect the spine, it can affect the knees. So the question is then, what is the increment then? How many hours of sitting and how many hours standing? That's been a challenging role for researchers, but there have been few studies that show what is a good index of sitting to standing. So what they say is that whilst too much of standing is also not good, too much of sitting is also not good, the best way is to have a sit to stand ratio. So what they say is, if you have a 60 minutes of daily exercise, okay, a 1 hour daily exercise, okay, and then if you engage in a lot of hours of sitting, the best thing would be interrupt your sitting time as often as possible. How often? Well, the ratio that they say is about, for every 60 minutes of sitting, you have to engage in 10 minutes of stretches. So if you have a 1.5 hours of meeting, then make sure somewhere between that 90 minutes, you stand at least for 15 minutes. So that's the kind of ratio that you have to adopt in your daily practices. So in addition to having a daily exercise, make sure that if you are sitting for a prolonged time, make sure that you interrupt your sitting practices by standing midway. All right. So at least now the question is, how many minutes of exercise should you engage with? Well, again, there's been a lot of controversies, but now most of the studies agree that you have to have at least 20 minutes of daily exercise. Okay. If it is 10 minutes, that's fine. It has to be vigorous, or 20 minutes minimum moderate exercises. Okay. And if your motivation is to lose weight, then you have to make sure that you have to engage in a little longer exercises. Okay. Now, you don't have to accomplish all this in one sitting. You could begin your day with stretching, and then you can follow it up with some endurance activity, and then you can follow it up again with another aerobic exercise. So you can spread out the entire workout throughout the day. Okay. So now the question is, how does physical exercise alone, how does it bring about a union of the body, mind, and emotions? Because when we talk about good living practices, I'm talking about keeping the mind, the emotions, and body in sync. Well, at the level of emotions, as I said, physical exercises, it triggers blood flow to the brain. It stimulates the HPA axis. And moreover, it has been shown by independent research studies that physical exercises actually suppresses negative emotions. Okay, so that's the reason why when you have a workout, you feel a state of bliss. Okay, and at the level of the body, it improves body stability, it improves balance, it strengthens the lungs. For COVID-19 situation, that's a very important piece. Okay, you have to strengthen your lungs, and it strengthens the heart, it improves blood flow. Okay, at the level of the mind, it does something so beneficial that people don't understand. So remember one thing, when we have extra growth in our nails, we can easily cut it off, right? Using, the nail cutter or the nail or some suitable device. If you have plaques in your teeth, you can either floss your teeth, or you can go to the dentist and the hygienist will clean all the stuff. Now, do you know that in your body, every day there are plaques that are being formed, especially in the blood vessels? Now, the problem is we can't use a brush there to clean the blood vessels. Okay, you can't put a device there and clean the plaques. So the question is, how do you remove those plaques then? Because with time, what happens is all this accumulates, and that's when you'll start having a lot of issues. Okay, the only way to dissolve those plaques are exercises. Physical exercise does that. it removes all those plaques, whether it's in the blood vessels, whether it's in the kidneys, whether it's in the heart, wherever you have the plaques, exercises actually removes or dissolves those plaques and gets rid of all the toxins. Okay, so at least 30 to 45 minutes of a daily exercise. Okay, and please don't be satisfied with just that. If you are sitting for too long, make sure that you intersperse your sitting habits with some stretches. Okay, now, how do we combine our eating practices with physical exercise? So remember last month, I talked about the 12-hour fast, a gentle fast that is very good for the body, the brain, and the emotions. Now, here is where you can combine your fast with physical exercise. And the way you do that is, let's say you have had your dinner tonight, okay? And now, next day morning, if you're going to follow the ketosis or the gentle fast, you're not going to eat for the next 12 hours, which means you're going to break your fast only next day morning, okay, around 8 o'clock. Now, if you do not have any comorbid health issues, okay, like diabetes or other issue or other health issues, what you can do is, after you have had a 12-hour fast, so let's say you woke up in the morning, okay, and around 7:30 or 8, instead of breaking your fast, go for a physical exercise, a 30-minute physical exercise. Okay, it could be at home or it could be outside. If it's outside, you can either go for a walk, you can go for a run, you can go to the gym, you can play tennis. Of course, it's very cold outside now, so you don't want to do those things outside, but you can always engage in some physical practices inside of your home. Okay, what happens is you're coupling the overnight fast with an exercise regimen in the morning, and this actually boosts up the levels of all the feel-good neurochemicals. So it's actually a double benefit. Okay, and this double benefit is at the level of emotions, mind, and body. So do this daily, or you can do it at least 3 times a week. All right, and that will help you in bringing a very strong emotional, mental, and physical immunity. So in my case, what I do is I try to have my dinner by 7:30 in the evening. Okay, both my wife and I, we have our dinner by 7:30. And then next day morning, what we do is at 7:30 or 8, we sort of, because it's cold outside now, at home itself, we engage in physical practices. Okay, few stretches of the hands, the neck, the spine, the hips, the legs, movements, okay, movement exercises, and then 30 minutes or 45 minutes of those stretching exercises. And then we break our fast. We either have a cup of milk, or we have a cup of coffee, or we have a bowl of cereal or something. Okay. Now, in addition to that, let me give you some few tips, because there are a lot of people who tell me that we absolutely do not have time to engage in a 45 minutes or a 60 minutes exercise. So for all those people who like to complain saying that they don't have time, here is a way to engage in physical exercise even as you are sitting in front of the computer, or even as you are engaged in some activity like fetching groceries or something. Okay, so what you can do is, during your break time that you have, or let's say you're watching a television, okay, which I'm sure a lot of you people do, okay, try, instead of sitting on the chair, try to see if you can engage in some exercises while you're watching the television, or while you're doing your work in front of the computer. Start look to how you can bend your knees, or see if you can sit on the floor and squat on the floor. Remain in this position for 15 seconds, okay, and then try to rise up with little minimal support. If you can do this sequence at least for a few times, then what's happening is you're improving your spine mobility, you're improving your hips mobility, okay, and that goes a long way, my friends, to keep you healthy. So when you're watching television, engage in some stretches, some twists, some lifting practices. And then if you are doing the vacuum cleaning at home, try to see, don't use those AI devices, don't use a vacuum cleaner. See if you can use a broom. Why the broom? Because if you're using a broom, you have to force yourself to squat. Okay, and when you squat on the floor while sweeping the floor, it becomes a great exercise to your hips, your spine, your wrists, your elbows, all right? And then you don't have to complain about carpal tunnel or any of those problems. And then not only that, if you're sweeping, you have to work under the table or under the chairs, okay? That requires you to bend your knees. And that's a great way to engage your knees as well. If possible, see if you can bike to work or walk to work. Of course, now with shelter in place, you cannot do that, but see if you can use your bicycle. Okay. Now, when you are out there in the grocery area, in the grocery stores or in the mall, see if you can park your car very far away from the entrance to the mall area or from the entrance to the grocery area. So that way, what happens is you have to walk from the car to the grocery store. And then if you're using a cart, okay, please don't leave the cart anywhere else. Go drop your baggages, your grocery stores into your car, and then see if you can walk back and place the cart back in the cart stand. Okay, so what is happening is you're engaging yourself in some physical exercise, and let's be satisfied that at least if I couldn't do at least 60 minutes, but at least I'm able to do some amount of stretching. All right. And then if you have a long meeting, and if you're sitting in front of the computer, make sure if you can stand in between your meeting. All right, because that becomes a very important thing. What happens is invariably when we sit to have a meeting, we get so engrossed that we forget the timings. And then what happens is you end up sitting for 2 to 3 hours, which is not good, my friends. And especially if you're doing that every day. All right. So good living practices is for you to incorporate good eating practices, also physical exercise. Okay. A daily physical exercise is the secret to remaining physically strong and active. There is a price to pay if you don't make exercise as part of your life. Okay. If you're sitting for long periods of time, make sure that you incorporate your sitting time with at least 10 to 15 minutes of standing. Fasting overnight, followed by fasting for at least 12 hours, and then followed by a 30 minutes to 45 minutes of stretches will really, really help boost your immunity at the level of emotions, mind, and body. Okay, it's a natural way of strengthening and boosting your immunity. All right. So with that, let me stop here and let me take your questions.
Um, Thank you very much, Ram. And everyone, as a moderator, I will be asking Ram a few common questions that we have received from his previous sessions. And before I do that, I wanted to say, Ram, those were very good tips. And I remember that, when my grandmother used to, in Chennai, we used to eat on the floor. And we would have, we would sit down on the floor and this thing. So in order to clean that, we would put some water and, clean it
Right.
then with a mop. My grandmother at the age of 70 was able to actually bend over in, and just do that. And
Right.
I was amazed at the way she was able to do it, so flexible at her age. Whereas now, I'm much younger than she was at that age, but I find that I'm not as flexible. And some of the tips that you have said, it is so good, because I now that we are working from home, I am trying to practice those, and I just wanted to share the things that I practice and have benefited from. Working from home, it has been this thing. So I have put a reminder on my phone, so that every time at 12 at 9:50, 10:50, 11:50, it rings up this thing, so that I'm reminded to get up and stand for 10
Very good.
minutes.
Yeah.
And so it has helped, because as an insurance broker, I am sitting 8 to 9 hours a day.
Mm-hmm.
And so this actually forces me to do it. So I just wanted to let you know that that is an option. Plus,
Yeah.
at the time of watching the news and everything, I know we watch a lot more of TV and everything. So one thing that I did read was that on the carpet in the living room, what we do is we can go in the form of an 8, And it and then that way I just I'm not just sitting or doing anything, just watching TV. I'm actually listening to what I want to see or what I want to listen to, and then I am just practicing. So these are small tips that I have adopted in my life to make listening to Ram's suggestions, and I'm hopeful that that will be helpful for you all also to adopt in your life.
Yeah. So
So
what you make is a very good point, Radhika, because if you go back and there are these epidemiologists and ethnobiologists that have gone back, and what they have some interesting findings, and what they show is that in the modern age we are using physical exercise in order to keep ourselves healthy, but physical exercise was never a part of a sort of an exercise regimen, because the caveman, if you go back to our ancestors, they used to walk a lot. I
yes.
mean, there was no transportation for them. I mean, they had to, for everything, they had to, either whether it's for hunting or whether it's for foraging for food, or we don't even have to go to that level. Even our, two generations back, our grandfathers, our grandparents, they walked wherever they had to go. They had to, there were no buses then. And even if they were, they couldn't afford. So they used to walk a lot. So for them, physical exercise was a natural part of living.
Yes.
Okay, and so that's the reason why they were so healthy. For us now, what's happened is, with all the aids that we have, with all the devices that we have, and with all the kind of things that we are leading, the kind of lifestyle we are leading, physical exercise, unfortunately, has now, instead of being a part of a living, it has to be incorporated, and people have to be reminded to use it as an exercise.
Yes. And I just want to share what Tom has just shared with us on chat, is that he uses a stand up desk when he's working. And that's another option that is available also for everyone.
That actually is a very good idea. People have, a lot of companies are now adopting the stand-up
Yes.
desks. But again, remember, I said in the beginning of my talk, too much of standing is also not good. It's not good for the spine. It's not good for the hips, especially for the sacrum, because as we age, the hips, if you look at the structure and the function of the hips actually, they serve as a fulcrum to the top half of the body and the bottom half of the body. So the hips are actually the balancing structures. And so you have to make sure, whatever happens, you have to make sure that the hips are always functioning very well. And what happens is, unfortunately, too much of sitting or too much of standing can affect the sacrum or the hips. And so too much of standing is also not good. So for people who are using a standing desk, to those people, I would advise, make sure that you incorporate sitting practices now. Okay, if you're standing too much, because you don't want to stand for too long.
Right. So let me go to one of the questions that we have. How does a 12-hour fast help the mind and emotions?
Okay, so there's a lot of biochemical mechanism that operates behind the 12-hour fast. Okay, uh, let me put it in a very lucid manner so everybody can understand. Now, every week we collect the garbage and then we put it out for the garbage collector to come and pick it up. Okay. Now, in our body and in our brain as well, we are collecting a lot of the debris. Okay. There's a lot of garbage that is being accumulated. The question is, who is the garbage collector? Okay. Or how does it happen? How does the collecting of how does the elimination of this garbage happens? Well, what happens is, when you fast, when you're doing a 12-hour fasting period, what happens is you're giving an opportunity for the brain and for the rest of the body to collect the trash. So automatically what happens is, the brain gets activated, okay, and it stimulates those pathways, those molecular pathways that results in removing the trash, okay, from the body, okay. And this includes dead cells, it includes worn out membranes, it includes cellular debris, everything. Okay, so it allows the body to free up the energy system, okay, that is required for maintaining your immunity, for maintaining your body against physiological stresses. That's one thing. The second thing is, by the 12-hour fast also boosts up the blood flow. Okay, so remember I told you about how as we age, the blood flow into the brain is decreased. Well, one way to increase the blood flow naturally is to engage in a 12-hour fast. So that boosts up the cerebral blood flow, and that improves the structure and the function of the brain, as well as all the other part of the body. All right. So in general, what happens is when you engage in 12-hour fast, you are actually stimulating all those molecular pathways that are required to build the immunity. Let me put it that way, to build the immunity at all three levels of individuality: the brain, the mind, the emotions, and the body.
Okay, thank you, Ram. The second question I have is, with department lunches and everything, brown bag lunches and everything. Uh, uh, One question is, at my office, we often schedule departmental meetings at noon. Employees bring their lunch with them. Sometimes the company provides a very good lunch. So even though we are eating at noon, just as you recommended, is it a good idea to combine office meeting and lunch?
Well, if you go back to the first session that we had, I talked about eating as meditation. Okay.
Yes.
And if eating is meditation, then you don't want to combine office meeting with lunch, because that's no longer a meditation. It's no longer a meditation session, because what happens during office meeting, you're engaging in dialogues, you're having a meeting, somebody's showing the slides, somebody's biting on their apple, somebody's busy sneezing, somebody is busy talking. So there's a lot of activity that is happening. All right, a lot of planning, a lot of arguing, a lot of debating. All these things are happening. So now that atmosphere is no longer conducive for you to have a quiet meal. The noise can become an issue. Okay, all this can have a profound negative influence, okay, on your digestion and your absorption. So if this is like a once in a month routine, then it's okay. But if this is going to be a daily routine where you're combining your meetings with lunch, then I would suggest try not to do that. Either you can have your lunch before the meeting, okay, so that you can excuse yourself and not eat during the meeting. Or if you can, try to stay away from having lunch during the meeting, and then try to have your lunch after the meeting is over. Okay, whatever you do, even during a meeting, let's say for some reason the boss wants you to be eating, okay, you can excuse yourself by just sipping some fluid, or by eating maybe a small amount of meal, but don't engage in a full-blown meal during that meeting period, especially if there's a lot of other activities going on. Because remember, in the first session that we discussed, we said you are what you eat, when you eat, where you eat, and how you eat. So all this becomes very important when you have to combine eating with meeting. All right.
Okay. Okay. The last question I have on my list is, and then we will go to the questions from the audience. Is if eating is meditation, and I know you touched upon it a little bit in the prior answer. If eating is a meditation, then we can never eat in a restaurant, and my kids love the restaurant food more than my cooking. Any suggestions?
That's a very good question. We all love to eat in restaurants, right?
Yes.
But we're not doing it. It's not a daily habit, right? It's
Right.
just like once in a week or once in a month, and it's just one meal. So that's okay. Okay. You're not. Let's not go gung ho over that. But if, on the other hand, if that's a daily practice, then you have to make sure that you are in a restaurant where there is, again, is it a meditative practice? Are you able to practice your eating as a meditative practice? Because there are a number of things that happen in a restaurant. Number one, there's a lot of noise, there are a lot of people, there's a lot of hustle bustle, a lot of activities going on. More than all of that, we do not know the temperament of the chef who prepared the food. Okay, we do not know the temperament of the people who are waiting on your table. All right, if those people are either sad, or if they're very angry, or if they have all kinds of emotions, probably because of their relationship with the chef, with the owner of the restaurant, then even as they are preparing the food, remember the negative influences that they bring into the food, and now that food comes to you on your table. Okay, and then you're eating that food, and then of course added to that is all the noise and everything. I would not suggest. I mean, it's not a good practice. As I said, if it's like once a week or one in a month visit, that's okay. But if it's going to be a daily practice, then my suggestion is what about cooking you have at home, because your home is, after all, a safe haven. All right. And so if it's a safe haven, then whatever be it, okay, if it's too much of salt or if it's too much of spice, whatever it is, at least you prepare it well. Because if you're going to follow the first two sessions, then you have cooked the meal as a meditative practice. So that meal becomes much more energetic compared to a restaurant meal.
So Ram, just to this thing, so that people do not feel that you're a party pooper, and that we should not be having any fun. What I am getting out of this is that, those things one off in, if it is not an in frequent or a daily practice, it is allowed to have some fun. It is
Yes.
allowed to have, enjoy those kind of experiences also. But on a daily practice, if we can use these good living practices to make our food, make sure that we are enjoying the food, make sure that when we are cooking it, we are in a meditative state and enjoying it and serving it in that way to our family. All those things are what helps our good health.
Yes.
So that is basically what I am getting out of it, so that people do not think that they are not allowed to eat in restaurants, or they are not allowed to go to parties, or they are not allowed to cheat once in a while. But
Actually, let me go one step further, Radhika. Uh,
yeah,
go ahead in a restaurant, go
yeah,
to social parties, have your fun, no problems. And then you can still remember, even with all that noise, even with
yes,
all that hustle bustle, you can still practice some
yes,
aspects of conscious eating or mindful eating. Where are
correct,
those where are those places where you can practice that? So for example, now let's say you're in a social gathering, okay, or in a restaurant. Let's say now you're being served. You do not know the temperament of the chef or the person who waited on table. What you can do is best is calm yourself down. Don't worry
yes,
about calm yourself down. Okay, you don't have to close your eyes because maybe you don't want people to see that you're closing your eyes and you're praying, or you don't want to do that. No problems. Keep your eyes open. Just say Anna Data Sukhi Bhava, or may the person or the people who have engaged in this food practice that has come to my table, may they all be happy. So now
mhm,
what's happening is when you say that prayer in your mind, you're already calming your mind. All right.
yes,
Now, even with all the hustle bustle around you, when you're eating, practice those simple little things. Chew your food, make sure you count your food, okay? And then, don't reply to your family members or to your friends when you're eating. Finish your chewing, and then if you want to engage in conversation, you can do so. So there is still, even if you're not following 100%, at least you can follow some amount of the good living practices, even in a restaurant setting, even in a social setting.
correct. Okay. Thank you, Ram. So now I'm going to the first question, which has come in the chat from Ramu. What is the maximum duration one can exercise in a day?
Okay, so I'm glad you raised that question, because there's this recent study that said what is the minimum amount of time that is required to get the benefits of exercise, and what is the frequency of it. So what they said is at least 10 to 15 minutes daily, okay, one session. Now if you intersperse that at least 3 to 4 times in a day, okay, so you don't have to engage in a 60-minute one on sitting. Okay, what you can do is 15 minutes in the morning, 15 minutes in the afternoon, 15 minutes in the evening. Okay, that in itself is a perfect modality to incorporate exercises. Now having said that, let me put a little slight warning here. A lot of people like to exercise late in the evening because that's when they get the time. And I can understand the philosophy behind it, because you say you worked the whole day and now you want to get your exercise. So you have eaten your dinner, but now you want to exercise before you go to bed. It's a good practice, but please don't engage in vigorous physical activity after dinner. Because what happens is if you engage in a vigorous physical activity, you are boosting up the adrenal levels. Okay, and that will keep you awake for a very long time. So if you want to really engage in a physical exercise after dinner, I would suggest a gentle walk. A gentle walk is very good. Okay, but don't do uphill or downhill walk. don't do any kind of exercise where you have to sweat, because that's not good, especially after you have your dinner, because that's going to keep you awake for a very long time. You will have problems sleeping, and then you're going to start another vicious circle of a lot of other things. Okay, so 15 minutes 3 times a day, so that comes to like 45 minutes a day. That is plentiful enough to see you through.
Okay. The next question I have is from Raji. Uh, Hello, Ram. Thank you for this informational session. I have a question about the gentle fasting. We just extend the 12 hour to 15 to 16 hours and have lunch. Is it okay to do this? Somewhere I heard for certain body types like Vata type, it is not recommended to skip meals and it aggravates Vata. Is this true? Thank you.
So a 12-hour is a minimum time that is required just to stimulate those beneficial pathways that I mentioned, the molecular pathways that get kicked on. That requires a 12-hour fast. Now, beyond that, if you want to do it, please, you're welcome to do that. Because if you notice, back in the old days, our grandparents, they ate only 2 meals. Okay, the first meal was around 10:30 or 11. So there was no breakfast. There was no concept of breakfast. They had a midday meal around 10:30 or 11, and then they had the next dinner at 6 o'clock in the evening. So it was 2 meals a day, and that was perfect, actually. Okay, so now, having said that, so you can extend your 12-hour fast to 15 hours or 16 hours. I know of a lot of my people who have come to me for consultations, for Ayurvedic consultations. They do a 15 to 16-hour fast, which is very good. But having said that, let me tell you, contraindications. People who have comorbid issues, any health issues, whether it's obesity, whether it is diabetes, whether it's hypertension, or for some reason, if you have any GI issues, okay, you don't want to go for a prolonged fasting. Okay, 12 hours is okay. You don't want to go beyond 12 hours. If you don't have any underlying health issues, yes, 15 hours is good. 15 to 16 hours is extremely good, not a problem at all. But be mindful of your health issues. If you have any health issues, you don't want to engage in a prolonged fasting, because then that, or for that matter, any issues with the nervous system as well. Okay, if you're epileptic, if you have epilepsy issues, if you have a symptom of seizures or strokes, you don't want to engage in more than 12 hours of fasting. All right.
Okay.
Thank you, Ram.
Yeah. I'm opening it up to the audience. If you have, please unmute yourselves and ask your questions before. Yeah.
And by the way, whatever I'm telling you, if it is anything pertaining to clinical, I will not take those questions. But if it's something of general, yes. Whatever I tell you is nothing. It's not a figment of my imagination. It's all evidence-based studies supported by both Ayurvedic and yogic sciences.
Hi, this is Shankari. I have a quick question. Yesterday, I had been for a hiking for almost like 8.5, 9 miles. I walked, but I did not sweat. So is sweating very much needed? Because it may not be really rigorous, but still, I mean, I don't know if this is a silly question, but I really did not sweat at all.
Well, don't look for sweat as an indication that you have had an exercise. Okay, as long as you're feeling well, as long as you're feeling good. Okay, because when researchers do their studies on volunteers for the benefits of physical exercise, sweat is not the outcome measure. They don't use sweat as outcome measure. They use your heart rate, they use your cerebral blood flow, they use your bone structure and function as the outcome measure. Okay, so don't worry about the sweat part. I just brought in sweat only because I sweat. Okay, but that it doesn't mean that everybody has to sweat. No, it's not that. Okay, there are people of a certain constitution who will never sweat, even if you go for 1 to 2 hours of exercise. Okay, so sweating is not the outcome measure. It's how much you do, how long you do, and how you feel after that. Okay, if you feel fatigued, if you feel dehydrated, if you feel if your head is swirling around, if your eyes there's a problem in balance, then you know that you have overdone your physical exercise. Okay, so please be mindful of any problems that come up once you engage in physical exercise. If you see all these issues, you know it has gone beyond your normal capacity. Okay, but don't take sweating as an outcome measure.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah, another question from me. How do we know what is our body type? Like, do we have any kind of self-assessment to know what is whether pitta, vata, whatever kapha type of bodies what we have, or do we have to go for the doctor to find out, like you to come and find out what is our body type?
So this question is pertaining to Ayurveda for people who do not know out there. Okay, and in this Ayurvedic sciences, we have what we call the constitution of a person, and the constitution of person is basically determines who you are or what you are, and there are 3 personality types in the Ayurvedic sciences. Yes. So how do you get that? Well, there are some. If you want to have a general feeling about who you are, you can go. There are some online questions that you can fill up, and that will tell you who you are. The question is, what do you want to do with that information? Okay, the number one. The second thing is those online questions that are out there. There are a lot of sites where you can download the information and you can fill it up. It's not an exhaustive information, but it's enough to place you with regard to your body constitution. Okay. But if you have a health issue, and then if you go to an Ayurvedic consultant, then they will tell you your exact physical constitution, because what happens is it's an exercise that involves nearly 50 to 55 different parameters. Okay, so it's an exhaustive survey that Ayurvedic consultants will do that. Okay, and you normally in the online survey you don't have those 55 questions or 60 questions. It's like 20 or 25, but it's enough to give you a ballpark about where you are.
The reason why I asked is because sometimes if we don't know our body type, right? Because we are not all expertise in any of those things. So if we try to follow certain kind of suggestions or advices from different kinds of people for the either the weight reduction or food habits or anything for that matter, we just try to take everything, try different patterns, and try to feel that we wanted to do something like for our motive. In that case, we should not be doing a wrong thing without knowing our body type. Suppose certain treatments will not fit for certain body types, like what Ayurvedic people say, right? So that's what we wanted to, I just wanted to make sure that what kind of body,
Well,
what kind of treatment.
yeah, I mean, if it's just for daily living, you don't even want to bring any kind of treatment modalities. You just do what you feel good about. Okay. The minute you talk about treatment, then the question is whether you are in a position where you can treat your own self. Okay. And I would not suggest that. It's always good to have a have a person who knows the subject, who can guide you, whether it's a modern science doctor, whether it's a yoga therapist, whether it's acupuncture, whether it's a homeopath or a naturopath. Always good to consult with them. So don't bring in the minute you bring in treatments, let's not go in the what I call the self-treatment mode. But if it's not treatment, if it's just a regular what we are doing for our own selves to make sure that we are perfect, then just go by what we call pratyaksha. What we have is all the guided tables that we have, the guidance through the online things that we have, through the talks that you have attended. Those are simple practices. And the minute you see some changes in your body health, which you may think of as an imbalance, then that's when you stop, and then you go back and undo whatever you have done. So just use some baseline suggestions, and then if the minute you talk about treatment, I would suggest just better consult with a practitioner.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay.
All right.
So thank you, Ram,
Sure.
and for everyone who has joined today. Thank you very much. Really appreciate your joining. And NBHC is delighted to partner with Dr. Rao in bringing you these GLP sessions. And starting today, starting actually not today, we did 2 sessions already. Northway Hindu Center will facilitate monthly sessions on the first Sunday of every month. And we have been doing that for the last 3 months. We will continue to do that first Sunday of every month, even through January through April. And please join us, and we will try and continue that. And the reason why we are doing this is to use, Ram's expertise in as being an Ayurvedic practitioner and a scientist and a yoga specialist. So and he has been involved with NBHC in its efforts as a cultural center as well as a temple. So he has been involved with us from the beginning. So we are very happy to support him on this platform, especially with regard to his book of good living practices. And so I have benefited from it, and I would really like, I'm not promoting it in the sense, but I would really like you to benefit from this book. It has really very good things that you can, simple things that you can adopt in your life. And so we will continue to do this. And also, this is an appeal for you as an audience. If you have benefited from these platforms and you would like to support NBHC in its efforts to bring these things to you, please consider donating to our, go to our website and donate there. And if we are a tax deductible donation is possible. We are a non-profit 501c3. So I would appreciate if you can show your support that way. And you can, we do it regardless, whether you want to donate or not, we do it regardless. But if you do donate and support us, we are able to bring these kind of programs for you more and more, especially in these times where we are not able to meet in person. So, but we will continue to do that. We will see you next time. Thank you, Ram. And
thank you very much.
Yes, I appreciate your help. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Radhika. And thank you, my friends. We'll see you in January.
Thank
See
you.
you in January.
Thank you, Ram.
All right.